I actually almost look at it as a sweet spot in real estate right now, and the market is very affordable.
Is your hot take that Kokomo is going to become a suburb of Indianapolis?
Whether you're a single-family developer or a multifamily developer, people want to come here.
What's something the world needs to know about Indiana? From South Bend to Evansville and everywhere in between, this is Get In, the show focused on the Hoosier State and the incredible stories happening here today. I'm Nate Spengel, founder of Get Indiana, and I will be your host for today's conversation. Before we get into it, just a reminder, this episode of Get In is brought to you by Cluster Truck, Indy's go-to delivery kitchen. If you haven't tried Cluster Truck yet, you are missing out. They have over 100 menu items, everything from hand-stretched pizza to tacos, salads, breakfast burritos, and my personal favorite, their pad thai add chicken. They've got something for everyone, plus delivery is always free. Now here's the best part. If you order right now, by the time this podcast is over, your Cluster Truck order will already be at your door. It's that fast. So whether you're catching a game or just too busy to cook, head to clustertruck.com, order now, and use code INDY, I-N-D-Y, at checkout for 20% off orders of $25 or more. Trust me, your stomach's gonna thank you. Reminder, that code is INDY, I-N-D-Y. Now let's get into the episode. Today, I'm joined by Mark Juleen, COO of J.C. Hart Company. J.C. Hart is a top-tier real estate firm specializing in developing apartment communities across Indiana. With decades of experience in real estate, Mark has helped modernize J.C. Hart's marketing and operations. And in a past life, Mark was also a podcast host. He hosted the Apartment Nerd Leasing Show, as well as co-hosting the Faded Golf podcast. A lifelong Hoosier, Mark is passionate about enhancing Indiana's housing landscape, and he grew up in Carmel, but is a proud resident of Westfield. Today, we're going to be talking about where you belong in Indiana and the affordable cost of living here, as well as a few hot housing trends. Mark, welcome to Get In.
Appreciate it, Nate. Glad to be here.
Dude, I am pumped. I've been waiting for this conversation. There's one thing about apartment complexes in Indy is there's no shortage of them, right? Like they just keep popping up left and right.
Yes.
And you are one of the...
I think that's the general take. You know, like I was talking to the mayor of Carmel a few months ago, and that was like, are they going to stop? You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it seems like they're popping up everywhere.
Which I love. I mean, it just like kind of is the leading indicator of growth, right? Because, I mean, one thing I've always been fascinated about is like, how do you pick where you guys are going to like what kind of research goes in the front end to know, like, you know what, we're banking on Midtown Carmel a decade ago or whenever it was, and it's like we think this place is going to pop, and then all of a sudden like Sun King comes in, Job House comes in, and that place is ripping.
Right.
Like, how long ago did you guys kind of like make that bet?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think if I go back to, I've been at J.C. Hart for 21 years, and if I look back on what we did 20 plus years ago versus what we do today, it's shifted a little bit. It used to be that you could go out into, just call it the suburb cornfields, you know, and build some garden style type of apartment community that was kind of sprawling across, you know, acres, to that being, you know, kind of the trend of like, how do we expand beyond or to the outskirts of Carmel, or how do you expand into the Noblesvilles, and how do you expand to the edges of these suburbs? To now, it's what is our proximity to the Monon Trail? What is our proximity to shopping? What is our proximity to the highway, even those kind of things? And you look at just, I guess, urban development in general, and all of that urban planning, that's the way that that's happening now. They want to have more of a strategic approach, not to just, hey, we need to add housing, let's just put it out in the middle of a cornfield, to, hey, what strategically are we going to do to plan where we can approve, hey, this is going to be great for multifamily housing, this is going to be great for single family homes, and obviously commercial, those kind of things. And we've seen an evolution of that for sure.
It's so crazy to think about. Like, I moved to Indy 5 years ago, so it's like it's always kind of looked the way it looks to me. But I do remember driving US 31 when I was a kid, and like Westfield and Carmel like just keep seeming to get like further and further north, you know,
right.
Like, and in my lifetime, I'm 27. So like in the last 27 years, it's like noticeably further north. Like there's no fields around Westfield anymore.
Oh, I remember growing up in Carmel, and once you got to 146th Street, that was like north, right? Like you're almost to like the wall, right? Like if I'm going to go with Game of Thrones, right? But you are like way in the north. And there was like a Farmore and maybe some crappy, driving range or something like up there. But that was like, those were destinations. You never went further north of that. And now you do have all this development that's going on in Westfield. The mayor of Westfield just posted on Facebook that There's some large company out of Chicago that's moving their headquarters or a large facility there too. They're trying to grow and continue to build what kind of tax base they can get up in Westfield as well. And of course, we've seen what's been going on in Fishers and all the growth that's going on there too. So this Hamilton County and what has really grown and expanded is fantastic.
It's awesome. It's crazy. And also, I learned that Fishers has only been like an incorporated city for like 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Like maybe. They've only ever had one mayor.
They were
like
a town for very
which is nuts because they have almost maybe just over 100,000 or just under 100,000 people now. Like it's nuts.
At one point, I think they were the fastest growing city in the United States. I think they still continue to be one of those.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, one big question that I think a lot of people have, especially people who are moving into Indianapolis, it's like, where's right for me? You know, like I'm from a small town in northern Indiana. Then I went to DePaul, so I was out in Greencastle, and I'm coming to the big city, and I'm like, for some reason, I was like, Broad Ripple. Broad Ripple's where and I love it. Yeah. I think it's awesome. It was perfect for me, but like, I didn't know what I didn't know. I was just like, oh yeah, like it seems like a right place. Kind of at the time, it was pretty affordable. Like I got in early, and I was lucky to be one of the ones that like, when starter homes were still a thing in Broad Ripple, like got it in 2019, and I'm like, now I'm sitting on it forever. I'm like, never selling this thing.
Low interest rate, you're not moving.
But I'd be curious, like if I give you a few different like personas, like from your experience of you know having housing all across the state and all across the city, where like the right neighborhoods would be for these type of individuals. So let's think like young professionals, like recent grad of, let's say it's Notre Dame, let's say it's Purdue, let's say it's IU or DePaul, Wabash, any of these places. Yeah. They're coming to Indy for the first time. Where would you recommend that these like young professionals check out?
You know, it's interesting. Me being old now too, I think things have shifted a little bit. But if we try to keep, this is my personal take on it. But you know, I think we try to keep a pulse on where the market's at. You know, I would say when I got out of college, what was that? Almost 25 years ago or whatever it was. I would have said, "Oh man, all my buddies are in Broad Ripple. You know, they're all moving here. This is the spot where you need to be." And then, you know, over a period of time, people kind of moved out of that market and they either gravitated to Fishers or they gravitated to Carmel or whatever suburb. But I think things are changing a little bit, and maybe not necessarily pigeonholing like what your demographic is and what age group you are. It's really what you want to, where you want to be and what you want to be. And I think you especially look at like a Carmel and what they've done with the downtown area, what they've done with the Monon Trail. You're just talking about kind of like earlier Sun King, you know, kind of coming in there, and really what they've done in Fishers and some of those areas where they're trying to create these areas that people want to gravitate to, socialize on the weekends, make it walkable. You don't just have a Broad Ripple now. You don't have just a downtown Indy where those features are there. You've got other cities that are trying to do that, and Westfield's in the middle of a project of overhauling their downtown and making it very walkable, bringing in even things such as a new library to now also restaurants and different things like that.
It's so sad to say, right? So for me, right, I'm like I mean, I grew up small town. Like I've been on the other side of like the Carmel haters, right? Of like, oh, Carmel just thinks they're.
Oh yeah.
And then it's like my friends started to move to Carmel, and then I started to spend more time there, and I like spent a night on 3 Up, like in the rooftop bar.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, and I never hit a stoplight up here, and that was kind of incredible.
And then like all of a sudden, like all these guys, and I'm like, and I went from like, I can't believe you guys are moving to Carmel to become lame, and now I'm like, ooh, maybe a little Friday night in Carmel doesn't sound too bad.
I hate to say it, but it's like all the conveniences are now in these areas. And again, you go back to like urban planning. I think the mayors of these cities have done a really nice job at trying to say, hey, I know we aren't Indianapolis. We don't have the Colts and the Pacers and obviously the large theaters, but what else can we have? And you look at what they've continued to grow, whether it's that Palladium or different, well, shoot, now where the Mad Ants are going to be there, Noblesville up 69. But I mean, all of that, they want to bring entertainment. The fuel are going to be out there now in Fishers as well. Like, you don't have to, it doesn't have to all be here, but the beauty of Indianapolis, and here's, in my opinion, you can live wherever you want. We have plenty of people that work for us. They drive to our corporate office up in Carmel, but they live on the south side or they live on the west side because of all the conveniences that they have there. But I think you can choose and pick anywhere you want to be that fits your lifestyle, maybe fits your budget, fits what you want to be close to. And it doesn't really matter what your age demographic is. It's where you want to fit and what you want to do.
I love that. And I think that's a good way to think about it because like it is, and it's changing so dynamically, right? Like, oh my gosh, 5 years ago, if my friends would have said granted, I'm getting a little bit older, but like I think Carmel's like a pretty decent spot to go out, like on a Friday night and like listen to some live music and hang out and like walk around. You can hit up 3 Up and the Goat and all those cool places up there. And it's like, it's kind of hopping. Versus like now Broad Ripple, it's like, I don't know the last time I've like been out and like about on a Friday night in Broad Ripple, like, which is a problem. Like we gotta, that's like one of my initiatives. I got to bring some life back to Broad Ripple, but like put it on my platter.
And I would say 10, 15 years ago, we'd venture down here as well. Now I'm older, I got older kids and stuff like that. So even going south of like 86th Street is, it's a little bit further, but we still go downtown. I go to games, we go to shows, and those are all draws. And I think Broad Ripple can continue to have draws. I think I saw some artist that's coming to the Vogue later this year, and I'm like, well, shoot, maybe we should go see him at the Vogue, and maybe that'll draw us, different areas.
What do you think the most underrated place to live in Indianapolis is? Where it's like, you know what, this place rocks, but it's not getting enough love.
It's underrated for, I think, anybody, and that it shouldn't be underrated because it's the number one place to live in America, basically, which is Carmel.
Oh,
and I'm telling you right now, it gets way too much hate. And it gets too much negativity for people that don't live in Carmel because of this idea that it's like kind of some uppity place. But I do think you can find a variety of different types of housing, different levels of affordability, still great schools, and all the conveniences of shopping, whatever that's nearby. Now, underrated, maybe that's not the way to phrase that. I just think it gets a bad rap. For all the great stuff. It does get a better.
I think it just gets a bad rap. Think you're actually right. When people think Carmel, they don't think affordability. But like whether it's, houses are expensive, but like you can get somewhere within Carmel for like, you're not breaking the bank. Like they're a very affordable apartment complexes.
$200,000 homes to obviously multi-million-dollar homes is one thing, but there's some older apartments in Carmel that have had some nice renovations to them. They're still in great locations. Or you can, move into one of our communities. It might be one of our newer developments that obviously is a little higher rent spectrum. But hey, there is a variety.
What's like your guys' crown jewel up in Carmel?
So Midtown Flats is right there nice. on Monon Trail.
There's a pool in the center too.
There's a pool in the middle of that one.
Yeah.
We actually have just started the process of breaking ground right next door. We're going to have another brand new property called Monon Square. Right next door to that, just kind of to the south. Yep.
Okay, so I have to say thank you because that little shopping mall thing was the least Carmel thing in Carmel. Like it was like there's a Soho house or whatever in there, and
that's about it. And I think there was a vacuum repair shop or something in there. You're
just like driving through and you're like, this does not belong here.
And it was a matter of time, obviously, till it got to. But hey, that's going to be condos, retail, apartments, another parking garage that caters to Carmel. It's kind of got everything. So you will have even for sale product and rental product.
We have any like sneak peeks of like what kind of retail we might be talking about?
I know we've got like a really high end fitness place that we're looking to get in. I believe we've got a steakhouse that we're trying to get in there as well. So I think there's going to be some good stuff that comes in there. So you're going to have restaurants. You're going to have of course, things that cater to the neighborhood.
And just to prove, though, I love that this is not just like we're gonna like hype up Carmel the whole entire podcast because I think
it's easy to hype up. Carmel.
I think the most underrated spot, is Zionsville. Like I freaking like that little brick streets of downtown, the village of Zions. Like that place is pretty sweet. Seems like he's got some beef.
I think Zionsville could be so much better.
Oh.
That's where I'm going to just maybe if I'm going to keep it simple.
If you could make 3 changes to Zionsville to make it better, what would you do? If you say remove the bricks, we're going to have beef.
No, we aren't going to remove the bricks. I think there's some great history there, and a lot of the residents of Zionsville have tried to hold on to a lot of history there, and it's actually held them back as a city. They are like the anti-Carmel. They don't want to be Carmel. And where I got kind of obviously heavy up front with Carmel was like, it's a great thing. And if you look across the country, more and more towns in these suburbs are trying to be more and more like Carmel. They are so leaned against that and they just want to turn their back to even remotely the idea that I actually think it's going to hold them back in the long run. And where I don't consider them underrated. I consider them a little lost.
Oh, all right.
So,
have you ever seen the show Yellowstone?
I've seen a little bit. I haven't
Okay,
watched
because
it
I'm
all.
getting big
Yeah.
vibes of like the John Dutton is like I'm the anti-progress. Like I don't want to like we want to keep the same ways, and then like Carmel is like Bozeman. It's like no,
Yeah.
we want the future of
And,
Montana.
hey, don't get me wrong. I think that there's some extremes that have gone on in Carmel, like some of the art projects and some things. You're like, did we really need to do that?
Do we need all
you know,
the statues that
Right.
scare the heck out of you when you're walking down the street at night?
Exactly. Do we need some of the details? At the same time, I think Zionsville could learn a little bit from Carmel and maybe not dig their heels in as much, and there could be an opportunity for them to really develop. I mean, they just had a whole plan. John Stair just went through a whole plan to approve to redo everything south of that Zionsville downtown. And because essentially the residents of Zionsville puts up so much of a stink, they had to scrap the whole plan.
Okay.
And that's just one example of, I just don't know if they're ever going to want to try to progress. I mean, if you drive into Zionsville, there's just signs in people's yards that, keep Zionsville rural Zionsville. And I get it, at some point, urban expansion, if you will, does get into neighborhoods that people are like, well, I like the way my lifestyle is and I like the way that this is. However, are you missing out on opportunity to create a more obviously modern type of lifestyle or modern type of amenities for a city and a neighborhood that because you're maybe trying to dig your heels in on, that's the way we always did it, like the old fuddy-duddy. But there's a ton of character designs, Phil. I think it's a fun place to go. Those kind of things. I just really, and they've got great character correct. I feel like they could be a little bit more progressive.
I feel that. I think that Carmel's done a good job of like being the like Beverly Hills of Central Indiana, right? Like it's
that's a stretch, but yeah, okay, sure.
I mean, like I don't know. Like if you think about like where people are like, oh, it's like very, very cultured and futuristic, and it does remind me a lot of like the time I've spent in like around Los Angeles and stuff like that. Like you got California Class there on the corner, and like all the architecture. It's sweet. I do want to talk about. Okay, so give us like a rundown. How many different apartment complexes do you guys have across the state?
So we have 29 properties that we manage across basically Indiana. We do have one in a little city called Sylvania, Ohio, which is just it's a little suburb outside of Toledo. I'll tell you what, I'll tell you a real quick story on that one. So we've got a partner that we partner with a few projects down here. They're a kind of more of a commercial developer, and they are based out of the Toledo, Sylvania area. And they said, hey, we've got this little infill location. Sylvania has been seeing.
What does infill mean?
Call it like an old tear down kind of like area that nobody's been able to figure out what to do with it since. So probably, as I just drove through Broad Ripple here, like tear down some old buildings, fill it up with something else. So an infill type of location. It was right off their downtown in Sylvania. And the city came to us and they were like, hey, we've heard you've been part of kind of these redevelopments of these little downtowns. We would love to have that as part of ours. So perfect example of Zionsville, pushing away, whereas this other little suburb of Toledo was like, no, we want that in our downtown. We want multifamily walkability to the restaurants downtown and whatnot. So we do have this one little project. It's about 200 units in Sylvania that we partnered with on. But the rest of our portfolio, yes, Hamilton County. We manage a property out in Brownsburg. We'll be breaking ground on another property in Plainfield later this year. We've got a project in the works that we'll break ground on maybe next year in Avon. And then we do have 2 properties down in Greenwood, another property on the south side of Indianapolis. We've got 3 properties downtown Indy, 4 technically. And then a lot of us, Fishers, Westfield, Noblesville, Carmel.
Where was the first ever property that you guys had?
Oof.
You've been in the game. They've been in the game for 50 years. J.C. Hart has.
So 1976. Let's see if we go back to 1976. So John Hart started J.C. Hart Company with his dad. His dad was a builder developer in Indianapolis in the 50s and 60s. Built anything from homes to strip centers to hotels to all different types of real estate development. Kind of the northwest side of Indy. So think about that Pike kind of like township.
Yeah.
Kind of impacted a lot of that area. When John graduated from IU, wanted to join his dad in the real estate space. His dad started getting into politics. But kind of helped started getting him into the space, and they decided to focus on the kind of multifamily apartment sector. In 76, we probably had a property out on the west side called Grassy Creek. It was out by the old airport kind of, and we sold that one, gosh, maybe 7-8 years ago. We had held on to it for a really long time.
There's a sentimental value there.
I think there was like a sentimental hold on. I mean, the oldest property in our portfolio now is a property called Bayshore. It's down in Greenwood. We built it in 1997. So it's going on 30 years old. But a lot of our portfolio really where we took off, J.C. Hart Company took off, was probably in the mid to late 2000s. Where our portfolio really started to grow. And so, yeah, we've got the 29 properties. I didn't mention that we've got one property right off, or really almost in Purdue's campus in West Lafayette, and we have 3 smaller properties off campus down in Bloomington.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm actually going to go down and check those out at some point, I think in the spring. And maybe, who knows, maybe we're down around, I'm not an IU guy. Right, yeah. So I'm a DePaul guy, but I've heard there's like some bike race or something going on down
Little 500.
Yeah, maybe I've heard of that
fantastic.
Before. Yeah, are you an IU guy?
Oh, yes.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, one thing I do want to talk about that I've like got a lot of, people talking about, my friends, 27 to 30 something like year olds that are like not getting to buy their first house. Like it's kind of crazy. Like Central Indiana housing is, I don't know, like it's just wild, like wild, wild west, like starter house home prices are, 300 plus, and getting in Indianapolis or Hamilton County, like, yes, there are some, you can get a $200,000 house if you're like out in the sticks or like your 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom and like a living room, kitchen / everything else. So talk to us about what you're seeing and like how increasing the amount of, like, obviously there's a ton more apartment complexes going up around Indianapolis and Central Indiana, but also like housing, and what do you guys see? Have we seen anything like this before, and what's going to balance this out so that like a 30-year-old can go out and buy their first home?
We are at an interesting spot. I actually almost look at it as a sweet spot in real estate right now, in that I actually still think housing here in Indianapolis and the market is very affordable. If you look at a lot of other markets that are similar in size or similar type of markets. So if you go to a Kansas City, Columbus, Ohio, down in Nashville, Cincinnati, those kind of markets, let alone you go to your Chicagos, or you go to obviously your New Yorks or some of your other more major metros, Dallas, those kind of things. And gosh, you probably could throw Nashville into that. The affordability in Indianapolis as far as housing costs and what rents cost versus what housing costs are is ridiculously inexpensive, which is where I think we're all very bullish as developers, whether you're a single family developer or a multifamily developer, in that people want to come here. And it's whether that now with remote work, people are just choosing where they want to live, that as well as attracting businesses is because of the affordability of living here. Now, I get it. When you're 25, 27 years old, 30 years old, and you still haven't feel like, gosh, you're like, when am I going to get that opportunity to buy my first home? This seems really expensive. It's just a little bit different than maybe how fortunate I was when I was in my 20s and I could get a $150,000 house, with no money down, basically.
What I think is crazy is that it's just like the inflection point has happened so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, in 2019, I bought a $185,000 house, which was like a lot. I mean, I'm a recent college grad. I'm like, that's a ton of money, but like I could put like barely anything down.
Right.
And it was like, oh yeah, this is like what you grow up and do. Like you buy a house. And now it's like that same house now like reappraises for $330,000 5 years later.
Yep.
And it's like when you watch your other friends of like, man, just 5 years ago, Nate did that. And like, now I want to do that. But like, I'm getting a worse house for more money. Like, I do think that it's like shifting a little bit of perception, but like, just because it was really, really good.
That was the thing. It was ridiculously cheap to live in Indianapolis before. It wasn't, and if you thought it was expensive before, your vision was skewed on that one in my mind. It's now probably, like I was kind of saying before, I feel like we're in this kind of sweet spot. We're still an affordable market. It still does require some money down on something to get. You got to save up. You got to be smart with what you're doing.
Versus like a Nashville, where it's like I think it's impossible to buy there. Like where you want to buy.
Well, it is, and I mean, even when I lived in Chicago, when I got out of college, and I lived in LA for a minute too. Like nobody owned. I remember my first manager in LA. What was that? 2000, whatever it was. And she was probably, I don't know, almost 40 years old, 35, 40 years old. And she was telling me about how she just bought her first home. And I was like, okay, no big deal. You know, I'm from Indiana. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Good for you. You bought your first home.
Congrats,
you know?
Karen. Like,
yeah, you know, and I'm like, whatever. But no, she's like, no, you don't understand. Like, and she bought probably like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath somewhere in, you know, Long Beach or something like that for like $1 million. So just everybody needs to have a little perspective here. You know, I get it. Like salaries maybe aren't the same here. And
quick pause in the action to introduce you to Barkeep Vodka, the cleanest tasting vodka ever, straight from the heart of Indiana. Now, this isn't just any vodka. It uses an innovative pressure filtering process that reduces bite, burn, and aftertaste. Now, I'm not usually a vodka guy, but when I first tried Barkeep, I asked them if they meant to make a vodka that didn't actually taste like vodka. Surprisingly, they said yes. Barkeep's subtle flavors means you'll taste the ingredients in your cocktail and not theirs. With its roots right here in Indianapolis, it's made with premium local corn and bottled in small batches to be gluten and impurity free. I also love the look of the bottle with the bar spoon on the back as a subtle reminder that this stuff was made for anyone who loves making cocktails. So grab a bottle of Barkeep vodka from your local grocery or liquor store and impress your friends with the cleanest vodka ever made. For more info, visit barkeepvodka.com. Okay, I want to talk about supply and demand. What's the timeline on like a J.C. Hart development? Like the one in Carmel that's going up right now, south of Bona Flats.
Yeah. So, I mean, each deal's a little bit different.
Let's go from like planning, like, hey, we should put something here, to like acquiring the property, to bulldozing, to building, to someone lives there.
From the point where we find an opportunity, and with as long as we've been in town, a lot of people approach us when they think a multifamily project is going to be something that could be part of, you know, a piece of ground or what have you that somebody wants to develop. And depending on how it's zoned, depending on how many units we think we can get on that particular property, and then obviously the cost of the land, we try to back into it, I guess you could say, and looking at, you know, what our typical numbers are. So we'll take like an initial stab at what would be a pro forma, or basically some type of an estimate and budget for what it's going to take to build a property like this, what kind of rents we think we can get, and then of course the costs that come along with it. That whole process up front and analyzing, you know, might take a month or two for us to look at a deal. But each deal also is a little bit different on how fast they want to come together. You take, you know, this Carmel property as an example. The people that were on that parcel and wanted to get things moving, they were like, let's go. We got to move on this thing. This is a hot and heavy project.
Who owned that parcel before? Like, I don't know if you're allowed to say, but
off the top of my head,
like just like some random.
No, not random, but another development group and partners.
Because I'm just like imagine like who like bought that back in like 1975 and it's like, we spent $55,000 on this strip mall in Carmel and now it's worth $55 million or whatever. You know?
Right. And hey, by the way, sometimes that's how some of these come together, right? Like you look at especially stuff that we built out, I'll just call them in farmland. You know, some farmer obviously owned probably some field and we built it, and often they end up, staying in the deal as like equity player and ended up making money that way.
Okay, wait. Let's take a brief detour down that because like I think that there's a good side and a bad. Like obviously, like, you know, suburban sprawl, like it's got to go somewhere. Like people want to come live in Indianapolis, but like the American farmer, the Midwestern farmer is like having to either like hold on and like try to make this farm work, or it's just like, hey, you know what? We're just gonna like sell out and shut the family farm down and now it's going to be apartments. So like, talk to me about that battle there.
So just this past weekend, we did our fall family outing, and we were out in Greenfield.
Was that at Lark?
This past Saturday? Yeah, at Lark.
Dude, those guys just emailed me and said I need to go to, because their main one's down like in Lagodi.
Yeah,
like their main farm, but they opened one in Greenfield, and they were giving me the background of the story. It's like, it's a super cool family business.
That's so correct. Wild. So it's this family business. They own tons of acres, like everywhere. And so I end up meeting one of the sons who's like running the show. And he's like, yeah, I've got a real estate degree from IU. He's just like, but I happen to farm. And now I'm just trying to come up with creative ways to repurpose this land that we have. He's like, this is one example. He's like, look at these acres we have just here to the south. He's like, I think that could be a neighborhood and probably some self-storage place. And like, he's just getting, creative. But I think that's what's happened. I mean, you can drive all across Indiana, and you're going to just continue to run into farmland. I don't think we're going to run out of farmland in Indiana, but along these major stretches of highways that we have, and where they can start creating these intersections and continue to have this urban sprawl, I think they're getting really creative on how they can expand, and whether it's just putting in gas stations to begin with, to then creating obviously some additional development. To me, that is how farmers have to strategically start thinking, okay, how can I still have my farm business, but how do I continue to take advantage of, the land that I own?
My best friend, he is a farmer in northern Indiana. And like, so we talk about, because he's like, he's like hungry, but it's like, you can't, like, you can break even farming, but you can't like make, like,
right.
You can't increase, like, he'll never, like, literally never be able to like go out and buy 100 more acres if he just like does the same thing that like
Sure.
his grandpa and his father, and like, no, that's no offense to them, but it's just like, that's the way the math works. Like, like the math works where it's like we get at the end of the year, like we get enough to buy seed for next year, refill on all of our stuff, and like we do it again. Like,
right.
It's the craziest, hardest work to break even. But he's now starting to look at like whether it's different science or different like ways that you can like use your land when it's out of season or anything like that to like help like actually start to stack some profits to like, expand the farm and do things like that.
Right.
So you're definitely like in the right vein of like being creative, and like, yeah, it might not just be like, planting in the spring and harvesting in the fall. Like, you got to figure out how to be a little bit more, like, I think the hobby farms and tourism stuff, like, the one thing people from, the city love to do is like go play farmer for a weekend,
that's
right?
right.
Like, come
Gotta
on.
go dig in some corn. It'd be good to go walk through a maze.
Yeah, be a real country boy.
That's right.
Okay, if you could wave a magic wand, like if I think about central Indiana, and let's say that like timelines and budget didn't matter, like how many more apartment complexes would we need? Like, what's like the supply and demand side of that thing? Like, if you could just wave a magic wand, like, yeah, if we had 100 new developments or 50 new developments, like, what's going to balance that out where it's like, now like we've caught up to the amount of people that want to be in affordable housing in Indiana?
What we do know is that statistically, different areas of town can absorb X number of units, per year. So, for example, Carmel historically, and when I say absorb, that means we can fill those up within a year's period of time. So if you build, let's say you build 200 unit property, another guy down the street, opens up a 200 unit property, another one down the street opens 200. On average, Carmel might only absorb, I don't know, let's say 300 to 400 of those units. So still 200 of those units are going to have to wait maybe another year until basically that population growth happens. And that population growth obviously is going to happen just through normal population growth, as well as obviously if businesses come into town. And so we try to really look at, one of the biggest drivers that we try to look at, are we continuing to see job growth in the market? And if we feel like we can see job growth in the market, meaning businesses are coming to town or there's still hiring is going on, jobs aren't leaving Indianapolis, we feel pretty comfortable that we can either hit those kind of average absorption numbers, or even like hedge a little bit and say, hey, you know what, we will eventually still get there depending on it. Now, market metrics and market factors can impact things. Like, so for example, interest rates going up the way they did this last year, banks and lenders put like a real slowdown or a halt to, hey, you know what, we aren't going to do any more multifamily deals, or we're going to put a hold on multifamily deals. So one of the other factors that is also a driver on like how many units is like the big banks are only going to lend so much money. Even the small banks and the local banks are only going to, the state banks are only going to lend so much money. And so there's a couple factors. Like, yes, we can do all the analysis we want. We can know, all right, yeah, on average, this market's going to absorb X number of units. Oh, okay, we know about the other developments that are going on in this area, and we can do all that homework. But at the end of the day, the bank's doing that homework too, and the bank is going to be like, well, we feel like that market's saturated, so we're not going to do a loan. Or we're going to slow down doing loans on multifamily because we feel like that market's saturated. And so there's kind of a natural balance there. Now, we've gone through markets, right, where, especially as we think about like housing and stuff, where like banks are like, just, yeah, do more loans, do more loans, do more loans. Sometimes then we get kind of, basically an oversupply in some markets because they were doing loans for anybody. But
have you guys ever made a bet on an area that just like didn't pay off?
I wouldn't say it didn't pay off in the long run, but I would say like in the short run, man, did we, were we early to the market? And the one example I can think, I had just started at J.C. Hart, and we had built, so that was what, in 2003? 2003. And we had built a project in 2000 called Pebblebrook Village, and it's Pebblebrook Golf Course right up off 32 in Noblesville. And it's right there. And, we kind of thought this whole 32 corridor that connects Noblesville all the way over into Westfield and whatnot was going to be obviously a big thing. But back in 2000 and even into 2003 and even into 2005, we really struggled. I think we maybe got to 80% occupied, come like 2005. And I don't think we actually really turned the corner on that one until 2006, 2007.
Oh,
so
gosh.
It took us a good, almost 5 to 7 years to really fill that one up to where I would call it was a sustained property.
Is there like a criteria? Like, so you guys have developments here on the north side of Indy, you have Indianapolis, central Indiana, Bloomington, West Lafayette. Are there other spots around the state?
We have a project that we're working on in downtown South Bend right now.
Oh.
So we're really excited about that on the river, part of their redevelopment of downtown, which will be really cool. So we're hoping that one comes together. We're building a project, third party, for another group in Fort Wayne right now. So
I was going to ask, like, where do you see, like, if you, could just like wave your magic wand and it's like, oh, we're going to go build developments here, here, and here. Like, what are the places where you're like, I think there's a lot of opportunity around the state, outside of central Indiana, we'll say outside of Bloomington, outside of West Lafayette. Where would you like, I wish we're going to start to look more up at these places.
Fort Wayne is a market that we haven't dove into too much. We had looked at a deal probably 2-3 years ago. Didn't end up all coming together. I think that also that southern Indiana, like on that Louisville kind of market, could be interesting on how that continues to grow. We got a little bit cold feet on some stuff we looked at down there, though, once we learned the market a little bit more. But I still think there's some potential long term there. I think a college town like, essentially South Bend with Notre Dame, I think there's plenty of potential there as well. So,
and just like you can see the strides that South Bend and Fort Wayne, honestly, both of those two have Evansville's done a good job too, but like they're taking some serious strides to, like youngify, like just make them like places where you go work, but you go eat and play and do all the things. Like I think they're doing a great job at the River.
Well, and if you think about like maybe just other like major metro markets through the year. So if you even think about like a Chicago or New York and whatnot, and you got kind of go, let's go about like urban expansion, right? Kokomo's not that far away, right? Columbus, Indiana isn't that far away.
Do you think?
And so at some point we are going to, and for that matter, Bloomington and West Lafayette are really not that far away. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing is you're going to eventually start seeing those become like connections and almost considered like suburbs.
Is your hot take that Kokomo is going to become a suburb of Indianapolis?
I don't know if it's a hot take, but there's potential where it really just feels like it's connected.
I mean, it's not really like what is between Kokomo and Westfield?
Tipton, Cicero. By the way, Cicero, here, you want a hot take? Cicero will be the next north suburb of Indianapolis that will take off.
Well, that's like that, because that feeds into Hamilton Heights School District, and they're like up and to the right on like, student
So,
growth
but I mean,
or
it's north of Noblesville, north of Westfield, right off 31. It's just a natural expansion. Part of that town's connected to the reservoir, right? So it's like, I can't see how that wouldn't end up being just kind of the next suburb that eventually takes off.
Okay, so obviously you guys have a ton of experience in like multifamily, like that's the shtick, right? But also the other cool things that are coming up. It's like I just saw the development of container homes down on College and Fall Creek, and like these more unique, like whether it's tiny homes or container homes or whatever. Like where do you see those kind of developments? And it's like, I mean, that might be like, obviously you guys do like 200 unit big complexes, but like when you're looking at things like that, like do you think there's going to be like an increase of those type of unique units in Indianapolis?
I still think, and this, if I just go off of even the fact that we can't establish public transportation around here, I think people like their space and they don't mind being spread out. And if they can get more square feet and larger spaces, they're going to do it. And the small, tiny, unit can make sense in pockets, but I don't think it's necessarily going to become like the big trend in Indianapolis. The fact that we all kind of drive everywhere that we go just tells me like people are going to be willing to drive so they can get more space. They're going to be willing to drive somewhere to get it, where they don't feel like they're landlocked and they can't go anywhere. That said, I just had this meeting yesterday, and it's a group out of Richmond that has started this process where they are taking old kind of, I'll call them, they're like past their prime extended stay like hotels, and they're converting them to rentals. And so to that point, on like more efficient units, you're talking 500 square feet, maybe 700 square feet type of units. They're totally rehabbing them. These are already in great locations. Most of them are near like retail and highways and stuff like that. And I think it can be a totally new model.
Are
to
they
make
doing
it, like,
it
more
with like shared amenities or like solo amenities? Like I think I saw one where it was like it's kind of like a dorm. Like they're making these housing apartment complexes,
Oh, really?
but it's like where it's like shared bathrooms and stuff like that.
No, this one, because they're taking, think about like an extended stay hotel. It's got a little kitchenette in it. It's got a bathroom, maybe has a bedroom, or it might feel more like a studio, like a hotel room kind of thing. Well, they're basically taking that. They're upgrading the kitchens, making them more like full-size type things, trying to figure out where they can squeeze washers and dryers into the units, but making them more efficient kind of square feet type spaces, which if you take like one of our properties here that we just, opened up this past year, the Edge up in Indianapolis, where, a 2-bedroom is over $2,000. Well, you might get a larger 2-bedroom, but if you wanted a smaller one there, you might be able to get it for $1,500 versus, you're over $2,000 for us.
Man, I love that. And I think that there is going to be more creativity, like it's just in developments. I mean, I just had Leonard Hoops on the podcast. I think we said that, but he talked about like the Circle City Mall and like the new development going on there. And like, I think there's a lot of creative developments, even from like old office buildings and
Right.
like all this, like the space in which we operated in 2018, 2019 is just a little bit different than the physical space that's needed in 2024, 2025 and beyond.
Kind of like I was talking about with like infill locations. I mean, if you even drive up into Carmel right now, there are these giant parking lots that are outside these office buildings. Do we need these giant parking lots? How can we repurpose these giant parking lots? Do we put in structures? Do we make multifamily housing in there somehow? And it can be for sale product. It can be rental product. It'll be really interesting to see how the urban planning comes together.
Pickleball courts. Let's replace them with
We need more pickleball courts.
We need more pickleball courts.
I mean, it's the fastest growing sport.
Oh, absolutely. It means going crazy. Okay, this will be fun then. Let's talk about amenities. You've been in the business since the early 2000s.
Yep.
And like, what were you seeing back in, 2004, 5, 6, where it was like a good multifamily complex needs to have X, Y, and Z amenities for it to be like top of the line?
I would say that simply, everybody had to have a pool, right? Like if you didn't have a pool, then you weren't even in the game. Fitness center became, if you didn't have a fitness center, and then through these 20 plus years, I mean, we've gone from, we've got this little room over here and it's got like, a multi-gym in the corner and it's got, a treadmill over here and a little bike, to now, I mean, like state-of-the-art equipment, with cable machines and free weights and whatever else, and a lot more square feet that we did. Now, one of the things that John leaned into, especially early on, probably in the 90s, and with a lot of our projects, we built these half-court gymnasiums, and as part of our clubhouse areas. And so I think that was a unique feature to us. I think he saw that in some other market and was like, well, shoot, we're in Indiana. We should be putting some gyms in. And so that's been a unique amenity that we've put in more recent years. We've been painting lines on that floor for pickleball, where we can have like kind of the mobile pickleball net that can go in there. I remember when we first built a few of them, we put like volleyball nets in, and it's like, no, we're painting it for pickleball courts, which is kind of cool. Beyond that, because, fire code and things like that, you can't have a grill on your patios. We've tried to put in these really nice, like, grilling stations where people can come to.
I toured Penrose downtown, which is like corner of Mass Ave and Michigan, like right at that corner right by Rathskeller. And like we went and toured the penthouse and did all the stuff there. And the outdoor setup there is crazy.
Yeah.
Like bocce ball, putting green, hot tub, and pool, massive grilling station.
Yeah.
So cool.
And so that's become kind of a critical piece to what we do too. But also just kind of like lounge areas have always been kind of key to what we've been doing. And we've turned that more into what I would call kind of like even like a work from home kind of, comfortable place where people feel like they can sit at a table, maybe, do a little bit of work outside of their
Kind of like coffee shop vibes.
Yes, you got it. Coffee shop vibes. So that's been kind of more of a trend of what we've done. So it used to be like this club room where it was like we would invite people in for events or parties or whatever it is, but we've tried to make it more coffee house kind of vibes.
Okay. And then where do you think like the most silly amenities are? Where you see like other places have it where it's like, they have X, Y, or Z thing and it's like, it looks good on a pamphlet, but then like it isn't practical in real life.
The golf simulator. And I'm a golfer, but I just feel like when you invite people in to use a technology that they're not familiar with, it's just going to probably end up creating a bunch of, problems, or it's going to be broken, or who knows what's going to happen. And I've seen it before. We're going to try it. I don't know. One of our new properties.
Which property?
So property's called Hyde Park. It's up at Saxony, kind of by Deer Creek and Hamilton Town Center.
Okay, and there's getting a golf sim.
Yeah, we're gonna have a golf sim in there. We'll have a little putting green there too.
What are like, if you had amenities like the most requested that's just like it's not feasible?
Oh,
people are like, I wish this had up.
I think bigger pools are requested a lot. If you go down south, like some of these properties like in Texas and stuff, they have like lazy rivers and stuff like that. However, they're, obviously temperatures are a lot hotter all year round. We use our pools are open, maybe 4 to 6 months out of the year at most. So for us to do like take a lot of real estate and do these expansive pool amenities, it's a little bit unrealistic for us.
Yeah, that's fair. When you're thinking throughout the state, if whether it's renting or buying, just like, housing, where do you feel like the biggest opportunity that people, maybe investors, might be missing out on? Like, you say, like if I was an investor, whether it's single family, multifamily, I'd be looking at developments here.
I don't know. How's that sound?
Hey, I appreciate you not trying to bullshit us.
I think there's going to be some additional expansion, like we talked about. I think Hamilton County continues to be a hotbed. I do think there's a lot of potential if we can get the numbers to work on the west side and the south side, though. Those areas cater to, I'll just call it more of a blue collar type of demographic. However, they still have like all those conveniences that I talked about earlier, with the shopping's nearby. Jobs are nearby, near to highways, all those kind of things. However, I would say from an affordability standpoint, our construction costs and the rents we need to get, they cater to downtown, they cater to the north side. It can be a little bit more challenging to build a property and get the rents in some of these other markets that cater more toward, just call it the lower income.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you see that, right? It's like if you build a 200 unit complex in Carmel, it's like you can charge a premium because there are lots of people that want to live in Carmel,
right,
or near Carmel or around there, like anywhere on the north side. And then like as you go further south, I do see, a lot of like more affordable home and homeowners and things like that are I feel like are very common down there.
But our properties in those areas right now, they're full, and we're raising rents and we're getting higher rents than I thought we'd ever get on those because there's definitely a demand. And so I don't think there's been as much development in those areas, and they definitely could absorb some more units.
I love that. I think this has been super informative. When people are considering Indianapolis, like let's say, someone from Ohio or Arizona stumbles upon this podcast and they're like, I'm thinking about moving to Indiana. What are like a few things they need to know when selecting housing?
There's no public transportation here. Okay, so as we talked about,
there
right?
is a bus. It runs some places, but like
there's very little.
You
public.
need a car, or you need to live downtown and walk around.
So I think the key that you need to keep in mind is what's your commute going to look like? What's your parking situation going to look like? Where can you walk to work? Can you do you have to hop on a highway? Those kind of things. So to me, is how you get where you need to go.
And the answer is always 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like anywhere you need to go, it's 20 minutes.
Pretty much. But which is also awesome about Indianapolis, right? Like in the market in general, I feel like you can get anywhere in just about 20, 30 minutes.
I would say like don't be intimidated. Like if your office is downtown, but you want to live like somewhere north of that or south of that, anywhere, it's like do not be intimidated. Like 8-10 miles or whatever. Yeah. It's quick. Like
you
can move.
It's not
you
too
can
bad.
zip around.
That said, that's where I place my number one value. And I think too, when we see that people come in and then maybe even move, they realize like, it'd be nice to be closer to work. So proximity matters, right? And so as you're looking for anywhere. And I think that's where the North Side has so many conveniences, those kind of things, quick access to 465 highways. That's always great. Next beyond that, what are people looking for? Shoot, from an apartment standpoint, to me, it's about obviously the location, but what I'm hoping people are looking for is what kind of service are you getting? Apartments have a tendency to be what I call commoditized, where it's like, it's a box, it has a price. But I do think there's a level of, how the property's kept up, the way the team treats you, manages the process of your move in, your move out, how you fix things, those kind of things. And you can find that out through online reviews. And that's my next biggest recommendation is like, it's a pain in the butt to find a place to live. I think whether you're buying a home or you're looking for an apartment, it's kind of a painful process because you don't do it that often, and you don't want to. It's one of the biggest checks you're going to write that month, each month, and you don't want to make a mistake. And so, to me, you got to do your homework. Make sure you get a good location. Make sure the reputation of the management company or whoever you're working with is good. And then on top of that, of course, the features that you're looking for. I mean, everybody's going to have similar features, but there's going to be some more unique ones, and got to keep those in mind.
Is there a way to I won't say test drive, but if you're walking in and let's say you have five apartment tours in a day or three, whatever, and it's what kind of questions could they ask? What kind of things could they do to really test what the culture is going to be like, or what could they say because I feel like they all start to blend together.
They do, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that Erica and I have been trying to work through is how do we help people through that process? I was the vice president of marketing for 18 years or whatever before moving into more of the overall operations role. And so as we work through not only how do you get people's attention and get them to notice you, but how do you help them through that process? And in my mind, it's about painting the picture first. Hey, how's this going to work? Okay, here's what we expect people to do. They're probably going to get to our website. They're going to look through the photos, of course, of our property. We've got a bunch of 3D Matterport tours on our website, those kind of things now. There's going to be floor plans, those kind of things. But really the next step come talk to somebody. And I know that seems a little counterintuitive in today's space where you can have everything online. But I'm so almost flipping it old school. And if you look at, I think about it now, travel agents are becoming more in vogue now.
Yeah,
they are, and they're ramping up, and people are starting to use them more. They're getting burned on Airbnbs,
and there's nothing worse when you show up to an Airbnb that had these immaculate pictures, and you're like, oh shit, this just happened to us. We went to Grand Rapids to see Alan Jackson. Freaking great show, phenomenal. Yeah. And we pull up to our Airbnb. And my friends are all the pictures were so good. I always send it to everyone. Everyone has to approve.
Just look good, yeah.
Pictures are great. Oh my gosh, this place looks sick. We pull up and the outside of the place is it's bad. We're in a rough part of town. We don't feel safe. And we're looking around and they're like, is this the right address? And I'm like, I think so. And we get inside and I can hold up the phone and I'm like, I got catfished. I got catfished on Airbnb. Yeah. It's crazy.
And so, and I think because of the way different websites and cookies are tracking you, you almost can't trust what prices you're seeing sometimes and things like that too. So I think people want to feel like they're getting a fair deal, they're getting treated right. And the best way to, do your research, do your homework, right? Try to narrow down your search. Like you kind of said, hey, what happens when I get to my top 3 or my top 5 choices? You got to go talk to somebody. And the best way I think you will find out on whether or not you're going to lean one way or another is how you're treated. And I joked for a long time when we would do sales training with our teams and the phone. I go, the only reason people are calling is to confirm all the stuff that they found online and to make sure that you're not an asshole. That's it. That is it. And too often, I think, especially salespeople in general, it's they felt like they had to sell something online. No, I'm you just need to get people to feel comfortable.
Yeah. Oh
That's
my gosh.
it.
Yeah. And be willing to be oh, I can see myself living here. I always say it's or if they're walking in, let's say you're going into the leasing office, I'm always talk to a resident maybe. Just be oh, what do you think of this place? And if they're just oh, the landlord never fixes the elevator. It's always freaking broken. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, huh, okay, like keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Like when the landlord's like, or like whoever's taking you on your tour is like, oh, the elevator's just down this week, but like,
Yeah.
oh, that's just like crazy. It's like, oh, interesting.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, like start to get that
Yeah.
validated. Like, trust but verify.
You
right?
got it. You got it.
Well, cool. This has been super fun. I think we've learned a ton about housing in Central Indiana and beyond. But I have a couple fun little segments to end the show here, and we're gonna get some rapid fire questions before we get into the lightning round. We're gonna start with our younger years segment.
Okay.
So this question is brought to you by our friends at Orr Fellowship. They're a great organization here in Indianapolis, and their newest branch is down in Evansville, and they're helping develop young business leaders and entrepreneurs across the state. So, Mark, what advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
I'm going to go back to that manager I was talking about when I was 22 years old that bought the $1 million home in LA. And she actually gave me this piece of advice, and I've stuck with it. She had observed that I was not afraid to challenge the status quo and challenge the way things were done. And I'd probably tell my 22-year-old self, you're going to do a great job of that, but at some point, you're going to get kind of stuck in your ways at some point and become some old fart, and you need to make sure you continue to challenge yourself. And so that is probably what I would tell myself, is to keep following that advice. There's been times, I would say, like especially here, like in my 40s, where I'm like, it's just easier to do it this way kind of thing. But I tell you what, everybody should continue to challenge like the status quo, for sure.
I love that. That's great advice. Yeah. And like keep that when you're 22, 42, 62, 72, like keep pushing that, because that's where the growth happens in that uncomfortability.
You got it, man. And too often I think, and I don't want to get too philosophical here, but like if you think about even the way we went to school and the systematic approach, everybody's like, you got to do this, you got to show up this day and do this. It's like, sometimes I think you got to push to the edges a little bit on that.
I love that. Well, that's great advice, and I think that really resonates with the audience. I do want to talk as we get into the lightning round. You do have a YouTube channel, correct?
Oof, it's probably a little dusty.
It's The Apartment Nerd?
So
tell me about this journey.
I will. So what was this? It was probably like the mid 2000s, right? MySpace kind of, came about, Twitter came about, Facebook, had kind of come about. What was that, like 2005, 2007, somewhere in there, right? The Firebelly marketing guys? Duncan?
Yeah.
So Duncan got some PR, and Firebelly marketing got put like in the Indy Star. And I remember at our time, Dennis Funkhauser, our VP of property management, he like hands me this article from the Indy Star. He's like, hey, and we were in some challenging times, and we were given like 2 months rent free. I mean, it was a tough time in the apartment market.
What
space.
year is this?
This is like 2004, 2005,
okay.
Right? And I mean, we were coming out of like a tough spot, like marketing and all this kind of stuff. He's like, hey, maybe we should look into, this group. And I was like, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And so I met Duncan, and this whole thing took off of us just like leaning into social media, really trying to lean into more of, what does our online presence look like as a whole, and to test essentially and learn all of these, I guess, channels, if you will, online. I took it upon myself to just kind of like, I guess from a personal brand or personal standpoint, figure out, what does it mean to blog? Can I create videos, posting content, whatever, right? Shoot, at that time, even Twitter was almost like a chat room. It was almost like versus maybe how it is now. It almost seems like just a news source. But
early Twitter was fun.
Yeah,
I was just like a little kid, but it was so great.
So anyway, somewhere along the lines in there, I went to a conference, and at that time it was the Apartment Internet Marketing Conference. It's now the Apartment and Innovation and something marketing conference, I think. I remember the guy who ran the conference, Steve Lefkowitz. He got up there and he was just like, "Who in here is a nerd?" And he raises his hand, and I'm like, "I am," And so it was like from that point forward, that I was like, "That's the brand name now. I'm the marketing or the apartment nerd." So
and then you just rolled with it.
Yeah, and so then I turned everything into the apartment nerd from that point forward, and just started kind of slapping that brand on it. And a lot of everything that I kind of created was just along these ideas of like challenging the status quo. So a lot of the content that you would see through the YouTube channel or whatever was just like, hey, why do we do this thing? Why do we market this way? Why are we spending money doing this way? Why is this company doing this way? And just challenging the status quo was kind of like the whole, I guess, theme of everything.
I love it. Well, after putting content out, what was the biggest thing you learned?
That it's not that hard, but at first there's a learning curve. I think you've probably seen this, but like the first stuff you put out, like my first blog I probably ever put out, if I read it right now, it'd probably be embarrassing, like how bad it looks. And doing it on a regular basis, you got better. And it wasn't hard. It just took a little bit of time.
I always say it's kind of like when guys grow their hair out. And so you just got to make it through that awkward phase.
Right.
Like you just got to make it through that awkward. Like I go back on some of my videos and I'm like, dude, brother, you posted that. But it's like, but if I wouldn't have posted those ones, then I wouldn't be able to post what I do today. And it's like you have to like go through those iterations.
Well,
and learn.
you start creating efficiencies along the way. Then you speed up your process. The editing isn't as bad. You get creative. I don't know. You got to love the process, I guess. And that's where I kind of got to the point where I was like, this is fun.
I love it. Well, it is time for the lightning round. So I have a few fun questions for you. We're going to just keep it easy, lighthearted. First one. It's like, what's your favorite style of architecture?
Style of architecture. I do love some like classic European type style stuff, Victorian kind of like French country even kind of thing. I mean, our house is kind of this French country kind of, look to it. But, when I took a family trip to Europe, not this past summer, but the previous summer. And I soaked in all that old European type of architecture.
I love that. I'm like a pillars, columns. Like I really enjoy like the old
colonial,
the plantation style houses. I'm like, those are dope.
Yes, those are great too.
What's your dream home feature?
Dream home feature.
Like if you could just like wave the magic wand and put anything in your home, whatever, what would you have?
Golf simulator.
Yeah. He's like, not for the residents, just for my house.
That's right. No, that's probably the one thing that I would love to have is like a golf room. So you'd have a simulator, you'd have like a putting area on like the other side. I feel like a golf.
It's actually not that expensive.
Golf cave would be pretty sweet. You just got to have the real estate for it, right?
That's fair. Actually, okay. Here's a free business idea. Anyone can have it if they want it. We thought about the idea of like converting whether it's shipping containers or trailers or whatever into like the golf sheds.
Yeah.
We thought that'd be like you just build a sim and you just like drop off this little manufactured house someone puts in their backyard and like here's your golf cave.
Yeah. I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah. So if you want that idea, feel free to take it.
Okay.
It's all yours. Whoever out there listening.
Yeah, whoever wants that.
Yeah. We kind of already got into this, but I had what's the best Indiana city to live in?
Best Indiana city to live in is Carmel, Indiana. But you can hate me for whatever that is, but
if you had to summarize it, what makes Carmel great?
But its location is fantastic. I mean, proximity to 465 to get anywhere you need to still being centralized in an area where they've built up a lot of amenities and stuff where you almost don't need to leave. It's a bubble. I go back, I joke about it, and during COVID, Hamilton County had to be the best place on the planet to live. If you lived in Hamilton County, you were in a bubble in which you could get everywhere you needed to be. You could also still be as safe as you wanted to be. And you could still go and still do stuff that you wanted to do and still feel like you were not, like you were safe. You had everything you needed. And I can't imagine living in anywhere else.
The most Carmel thing you ever could have said was, it's like our own little bubble. Like, yeah, it is.
It is.
You're not wrong.
It is. And I don't even by the way, you said he lives in Carmel. I don't live in Carmel. I actually live in Westfield.
Oh.
So there you go. I grew up in Carmel, though.
You grew up in Carmel, but now you live in Westfield now?
Yeah, I live in Westfield now.
I mean, that's the same thing, basically.
I call it the Hamilton County bubble.
Westfield will actually take offense to that. I'm going to get them in the comments. They're going to be like, don't ever say that Westfield is Carmel.
Yeah.
What is the most Indiana thing in your house?
Signed picture of Bob Knight throwing the chair. That's probably the most Indiana
autographed
thing.
by Bob Knight.
Autographed by Bob Knight. That's probably the most Indiana thing.
Okay, wait. Did you get it? Did you go up to him and have him sign it? How did that work?
somebody found it, gave it to me as a gift. And I'm like, that's an awesome gift. And that is probably the most Indiana thing.
That is a very Indiana thing. Okay, and then final question before we get to our last 3 consistent questions we ask all the time. What's the coolest property you've ever visited in Indiana?
Have you been to the Restoration Hardware?
I haven't, but everyone says I need to.
I don't know even what you'd call that. It's like
the mansion thing?
The mansion, yeah. That's pretty spectacular. That comes to top of mind, I guess you could say. A friend's house, well, I'll call it like loft, that he had in downtown Indianapolis, kind of near Mass Ave as well. And that blew my mind. That was pretty special.
Like loft above, just like you get a.
It's like he had this warehouse loft house downtown Indianapolis, and you didn't even know what it was. And then I went to some event party there or whatever it was with the apartment association. I was like, this is amazing, pretty spectacular.
I was hoping maybe it's didn't Tony Stewart have a compound down by Columbus or there's some cool stuff. Big Scott Jones had his mansion up somewhere on the north side. There's some cool the Lucas Oil Estate or whatever.
John Hart has a pretty badass lake house up in Culver, Indiana.
Oh, on Max?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So
I try not to talk about, personal stuff there, but he does have a pretty nice place.
Well, we go up and we rent a house on Lake Max once a week. Actually, I say we, my best friend's family does, and I just tag along with them. Yeah. And it is my favorite lake in the state of Indiana.
It's fantastic.
It is so cool. And I think Ursays have a house up there too.
They do.
We're not telling where anyone lives, but if you Google map it, it's not very hard to find.
Yeah, not very hard to find. But the little town of Culver, fantastic place in Indiana.
The Lake House, Lake Shore Grill, Lake House Grill.
Yeah, Lake House Grill, Papa's Pizza, so good.
Yes.
And shout out to the Papa's folks.
Yes.
Yeah, if you want what I think is probably the best pizza in Indiana, I think it's Papa's in Culver. I think so.
That is big praise.
I know.
I would say normal pizza.
Like normal pizza.
Yeah.
Well, I'll call it, you're right. I'll call it tavern pizza kind of thing.
Yeah, because
right?
there's the fancy bougie. I have been ridiculed.
Yeah.
And people have poked and prodded of all stuff. Yeah. So Yelp released their, 2024 top pizza spots in Futuro, downtown Indy. It's Detroit style. It's artisan. It's really, really good pizza. But I would say Papa's is up there for tavern style.
Tavern style pizza. It's right up there with Ale Emporium. Which is also another just great tavern style pizza. And I'm telling and if people can disagree with me, sauce makes the pizza. And if you say anything else makes a pizza other than sauce, you're wrong. There we go. I will.
Hot take. Hot take. Mark's got the pizza hot takes. I love it.
Pizza hot take. There.
Well, all right, here we go. We're gonna get into the lightning round, and we can chit chat about some of your favorite stuff. So, what's something the world needs to know about Indiana?
The world needs to know about Indiana. Oh man, we are under the radar, and it's fantastic.
So you don't want the world to know anything?
No. Well, again, I had that meeting with that group even yesterday. That's talking about converting these, extended stay hotels, and they were like, "Oh my God!" Every time we come here, we're like, "This place is fantastic," and they're from Richmond, Virginia, or whatever, right? And also,
I was thinking Richmond, Indiana.
No, they're from Richmond, Virginia. And it's like every time they come here, like, "This place is great. Why wouldn't anybody want to live here?" And he's like, you guys just fly under the radar. I'm like, "Yeah, we kind of like it that way."
All right, I like that. I like that. Mark, what is a hidden gem in Indiana?
If there is any artist that you remotely like and they come to the Palladium, you should go. It is the best sounding venue you'll ever go to a concert at, ever.
What kind of artists come through the Palladium?
Often it is more I'll call them classical artists or they're older artists. But every now and then you get kind of some pop ones that fill in there. I saw Jason Mraz there. I saw Boyz II Men there. I've seen Darius Rucker there, and I saw Sting there probably most recently. And so you can get a variety, but I recommend anybody who is within driving distance of the Palladium, always look at their lineup each year. And if there is an artist that you remotely like, go see them there.
What makes it sound so good?
It was completely designed for that purpose. And they've actually improved it even over the years and made it even better to be the essentially best audio quality sounding, essentially theater ever.
All right, January 11th. Let's Sing Taylor, a live band experience celebrating Taylor Swift.
Hey, there you go.
All right.
They usually have a country. You said you went to Alan Jackson. They usually have a lot of country artists that come through. They have like a country.
I'm looking through.
You'll have to keep
There's
track.
a lot of like the Folsom Prison Experience, like
Right.
legendary Johnny Cash concert. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna keep the Palladium on my bucket list then
Yep.
of like venues I need to go check out because I have heard this. Like I heard this feedback.
Yeah.
Like there's some the Red Hot Chili Pipers.
Oh my.
Yes.
So there are some obscure things that are coming in there, but you know what? They're really trying to improve that. I was talking with their new director that kind of took over a couple of years ago. I happened to be at an event with True You, which is a leadership kind of I guess networking type of group here based out of Fishers, but he was there as part of that, and we were chit-chatting about some of the stuff that they're trying to improve.
I love it. Final question. You get to give some love to another Hoosier. Who's a Hoosier that we need to keep on our radar? Someone who's doing big things.
Answer number one would be Pat Chittenden. And Pat is a fraternity brother of mine. Patch Development is his company. He is one of the major projects he's working on is that Mad Ant Stadium there up off 69. And so he's doing some big things as it relates to commercial real estate development in Indiana. Really has taken off as well in the last few years. And I think him and his team are doing a great job in that space. And he'll be somebody to kind of watch as they continue to grow. And then the other one, and I'm going to go sports, and it's going to be my hot take for the day, but Chris Ballard, Indianapolis Colts. Chris Ballard is completely underrated because everybody treats him as from a wins and losses standpoint, but he is one of the best football minds out there.
Wow. That might get some backlash.
It can.
I love it.
But he's one of the hardest working men I've ever met in my entire life.
Okay. Does that come from a personal relationship?
Yes.
All right. I like that then. I'll take that. Because a lot of times people like either, throw hate or throw praise or whatever. And it's like, oh, you don't. If you actually know him, I love that.
I do know him. I know him really well. And he's one of the hardest working men in sports.
Heck yeah. Well, after the season, when Chris wants to come and chop it up with us on the podcast, we'll make that happen. Heck yeah. We'll talk everything but football.
That's hard to do with him.
Oh, I love it.
I'm telling you, he loves the game.
I love it. Mark, this was awesome. I think that I hope the listeners get a ton out of this of like housing in Central Indiana and honestly just like things that are going on beyond and how you can find your place here in Central Indiana and Indiana in general. Obviously, I'm going to subtly plug, go check out J.C. Hart. They have some amazing facilities all across the state, from Bloomington to West Lafayette, up to, you're working on something in South Bend, right?
We're working in South Bend.
Heck, and then
Hope
you
to get that
said helping with a development, but it's not one of yours in Fort Wayne?
Fort Wayne, yep.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's cool to see you guys investing all across the state. I did, the video will be live. Go check out my tour of the penthouse at Penrose. Yeah. I had an insanely cool time there. The view is incredible. You can see all of downtown.
Pretty special.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it's one of those
We
ones
felt really lucky to be a part of that project. I mean, you never know when you're in a historical, area of downtown, and we want to make sure you put in something right. And our architect, that we worked with on that one, really, we wanted to make it right, and I think it turned out great.
Oh my gosh, it's awesome! And the amenities in the center of it, all the cool stuff. I definitely recommend go check it out and see if you can guess what the monthly rate is of the penthouse at Penrose. So, Mark, thank you for stopping by. Until next time, we'll have you back on, and we'll chop it up about all things. Maybe we'll check in on Zionsville and see how they're doing.
Ooh, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, right.
Sounds good, man.
So appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Get In. If you liked what you heard, make sure you leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. This show was made possible by our friends up at Sweetwater. Whether you're trying to start your own podcast or looking to take your show to the next level, make sure you check out sweetwater.com for all your creator needs. If you want exclusive behind-the-scenes content on all things Indiana, make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nate Spangle. Thank you for being part of what makes the Hoosier State so amazing. We'll see you next week here on Get In.